This agreement hit the floor before I could grab it, papers fanning out across the hardwood like my sister-in-law had planned the whole thing for maximum effect. "You think a piece of paper makes this yours?" She laughed, and it wasn't a nice laugh. It was the kind that told you exactly how little someone thought of you. "This house has been in this family for 30 years. You've been in this family for 3. My name is Waverly Cross. I'm 31 years old, and until about 40 seconds ago, I had been trying very hard to be the kind of person who didn't cause scenes at family dinners." My husband stood at the kitchen doorway holding a dish towel, watching his sister crouch down to pick up the papers she'd just knocked out of my hands. He didn't move. He just stood there the way he always stood there when she did things like this, like he was waiting for the weather to change. I should back up. When my husband Theo and I got married 3 years ago, I was 28, 2 years into building my own property management company from a single laptop and a lot of cold calls. We bought this house together, or I thought we did. Theo's name was on the mortgage because mine was still being rebuilt after a rough patch in my mid-20s, a failed partnership that left me with debt and a hard education about trusting people who smiled too easily. He said it didn't matter whose name was on the paper. He said what was his was mine. His sister Darlene had other ideas about that. She was 38, single, and had what I can only describe as a full-time emotional lease on her brother. She called him twice a day. She showed up at our house without texting first. She had opinions about how I loaded the dishwasher, how I spent money, how I dressed for his work events. In the beginning, I thought she was just protective. A lot of siblings are protective. I came from a close family too. I understood that. What I didn't understand was that in Darlene's mind, I was temporary. She never said it out loud, not at first. It was more like a low hum underneath everything she did, the way she'd refer to the house as Theo's place when she talked to people at family gatherings, the way she'd ask him about financial decisions and then look surprised, almost offended, when he told her to talk to me, the way she'd make comments about how I was always working on something, as if ambition was a personality flaw she was graciously tolerating. I managed 8 residential properties by our first anniversary, 12 by our second. She found out through his mom, who found out through Theo, who mentioned it during the Sunday phone call, without really thinking about what that information would do in his sister's hands. The comments shifted after that. Less about my domestic habits, more about money. Did I have investors? Were my contracts solid? Wasn't it risky to grow that fast? Wasn't I worried about overextending? Every question wrapped in a voice that sounded almost like concern, almost like she was just looking out for me. If you weren't paying attention to her eyes when she asked, I was always paying attention. The dinner where everything broke open happened on the Thursday in March. Theo's parents were in town for the weekend, staying with us the way they always did when they visited from Savannah. His mom was lovely. Quiet, measured, the kind of woman who kept the peace so well you didn't realize she was doing it until she wasn't in the room. His dad was fine, harmless. He liked football and bad coffee and didn't involve himself in things that weren't his business. Darlene had driven up from Richmond for the occasion. 3 hours. She arrived with a bottle of wine she didn't share and a mood she absolutely did. Dinner was normal at first. His mom asked about my properties. His dad asked about the weather in March. Theo talked about his job, something in civil engineering that I'd learned enough about to ask one good question per conversation. Darlene was quiet in a way that felt like preparation. It wasn't until after dessert, when Theo's parents had gone upstairs and Theo had stepped out back to take a work call, that she leaned across the kitchen table and slid a piece of paper toward me. "I had someone look into the property records," she said. Her voice was very calm. "The house isn't Theo's name, just Theo's. I looked at the paper. It was a printout of the county property records. She'd highlighted his name, just his name. "I know that," I said. "Then you know it's his house. And I think it's time we had a conversation about what happens if things don't work out." I stared at her. "I'm not trying to be cruel," she said. "I love my brother. And he has a lot of assets now. The house, the retirement accounts, the investments I helped him set up before you two met. I just want to make sure everyone understands what's protected and what isn't." I asked her very quietly what exactly she was suggesting. She smiled the smile of someone who had been waiting to have this conversation for 3 years. She told me she thought Theo should formalize things, a postnuptial agreement. Something that kept his premarital assets clearly in his column, in case the marriage didn't go the way we hoped. She'd even, she said, already spoken to a family attorney she knew. She'd already spoken to an attorney. About my marriage. Without talking to me. Without talking to Theo, I was about to find out. I picked up the property record printout. I held it for a moment, and then I set it back down on the table and pushed it toward her. I want you to leave, I said. She blinked. Excuse me. I want you to leave this house. Tonight. She laughed a little, surprised, not amused. Waverly, I'm a guest here. You're a guest in my home, I said, and you just sat in my kitchen and told me you've been consulting attorneys about how to legally protect my husband's assets from me. You don't get to stay after that. This is exactly, she started. No. I stood up. We're not doing the part where you tell me I'm overreacting. You made a move. I'm responding to the move. She started to say something else, but the back door opened, and Theo walked in, still holding his phone, reading the room immediately, the way people do when they've walked into the end of something. He looked at me. He looked at his sister. He looked at the paper on the table. What's going on? I told him. Not loudly, not theatrically. I just told him exactly what she'd said, in order, including the part about the attorney. I watched his face move through something I hadn't seen before, not the frozen non-reaction I'd come to expect, but something harder, slower. He picked up the paper. He looked at it. He set it down. Did you do this? He asked her. I was protecting you. Did you hire an attorney to review our marriage? The word "our" landed differently than I think she expected. I made an inquiry, she said. I haven't done anything yet. I was trying to. She needs to leave, Theo said. Darlene went very still. Tonight, he said. I'll talk to you later, but not here, and not tonight. I watched her face go through several things, disbelief first, then something wounded and angry underneath it. She looked at me once, like she was deciding whether to say something she couldn't take back, and then she picked up her purse from the back of the chair and walked out through the front door without saying good night to anyone. The house was quiet after that. The kind of quiet that has weight to it. Theo sat down at the kitchen table and didn't say anything for a while. I sat across from him. His parents were upstairs, probably already asleep. The wine his sister had brought was still on the counter, unopened. How long has she been doing this? He finally asked. I told him. Not everything, not 3 years of catalogued small moments, but enough. The comments about the house, the questions designed to make me feel precarious, the way she'd consistently framed my work as a hobby until she found out it was making real money, and then framed it as a risk. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, I'm sorry. I told him I didn't want an apology. I told him I wanted to know where he stood. He looked at me for a long moment. You're my wife, he said. This is our house. I don't know why that wasn't obvious, but I'll make it obvious. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I was angry. I'd moved past angry somewhere between the table and the front door closing. I didn't sleep because I was doing math. I'd been in business for 3 years. I managed 12 properties. My company grossed $400,000 in its most recent fiscal year, which was more than Theo made, which was a fact neither of us discussed out loud, but that lived in the space between us the way facts like that do when you're not sure how they land. His sister thought I was dependent. She thought her financial leverage over her brother, the retirement accounts she'd helped him set up, the old investments, the name on the deed, was enough to make me foldable. She didn't know what I knew. I got up at 5:30 in the morning and sat at my desk with my coffee and opened my files. 6 months earlier, when Theo and I had started talking seriously about our long-term plans, I had quietly consulted a real estate attorney about marital property law in our state. Virginia is an equitable distribution state, which meant that in the event of a divorce, a court would divide marital property, including equity accrued during the marriage, based on fairness, not 50-50, but fairness. The house had appreciated $60,000 since we'd bought it. My income had contributed directly to the mortgage. My attorney had advised me to document everything, and I had. But more than that, I'd been planning a different kind of move for the past 4 months. One I hadn't told Theo about yet because the timing hadn't been right and because, honestly, part of me had wanted to be certain before I said anything out loud. I had put in a cash offer on a property, not a client's property, My own. A small commercial building 3 miles from our house. A mixed-use space with 2 ground-floor retail units and 3 residential apartments above them. It had been listed for $260,000. I'd offered $250,000. They'd accepted in December. The closing was in 11 days. I had purchased it entirely through my LLC, entirely in my name. When Theo came downstairs at 7, I was still at my desk. He stood in the doorway with his own coffee and looked at me the way he sometimes did when he wasn't sure what version of me he was walking into. "You're working already? I need to tell you something," I said. I showed him the closing documents, the purchase agreement, the LLC operating agreement that listed me as sole member and manager, the property photos, the rental projections I'd built out over the next 5 years. He sat on the edge of the desk and read everything slowly. When he finished, he looked up at me. "You did this by yourself?" "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because I wanted to know if I could," I said, "and I wanted it to already be real before I said it out loud." He nodded slowly. He understood that, I think, more than he let on. "This is yours," he said. "It wasn't a question. This is mine." Something settled in his face, not discomfort, more like recalibration. Like he was adjusting to a version of his life that he hadn't fully mapped yet. Darlene called him 4 times that day. He let them go to voicemail. She called his mother next. His mother called him. He answered that one, and I heard his half of the conversation from the kitchen, where I was making lunch and trying very hard not to feel like I was eavesdropping on my own marriage. He was patient with his mother. He told her Darlene had crossed the line. He told her it wasn't about the argument at the table. It was about a pattern, and that he needed her to understand that his wife was his partner in every sense of that word, and that if Darlene couldn't see that, she was going to have a hard time being welcome in our home. His mother said something I couldn't hear. He said, "I know, but this is what it is, Mom." When he came into the kitchen, his expression was tired but steady. "She wants to apologize," he said. "I know. I told her you might not be ready for that. I'm not." He nodded. He didn't push it. 3 days later I got a text from Darlene. No call. A text. It was long, the kind of text that takes a while to write and is really a speech that someone couldn't quite figure out how to deliver. It said she hadn't meant to make me feel threatened. It said she loved her brother and sometimes that came out the wrong way. It said she could see that I worked hard and that she respected that, even if she hadn't always shown it. It said she hoped we could eventually get to a better place. I read it twice. Then I screenshot it and sent it to my phone so I'd have it, and I put my phone face down on my desk and went back to work. The closing happened on a Tuesday. I drove there alone, signed everything, shook hands with the seller's agent, and walked through the building one more time by myself before I drove home. It was mine, not Theo's, not our LLC, not a joint venture, not something we'd built together that could later be argued over by people with highlighted property records and opinions about whose name should be where. Mine. The product of 3 years of early mornings and late nights and phone calls and spreadsheets in the very particular discipline of a person who had been told, in various ways and by various people, that she was building something fragile. Theo met me in the driveway when I got home. "How was it?" he asked. "Good," I said. He looked at me for a second. "Are you happy?" I thought about it. "Not the way you think when you're uncertain. The way you think when you're uncertain. The way you think when the answer is complicated enough to deserve a real answer." "Yeah," I said. "I really am." We went inside. He made dinner. I opened my laptop and started reviewing the lease templates for the commercial units. The house was warm. The dog was asleep on the couch he wasn't supposed to be on. Theo was humming something in the kitchen that I couldn't quite identify, but that felt familiar in the way that most things in a real life feel familiar. Not memorable, just present. Darlene sent flowers the following week. A nice arrangement. No card, just her name. I put them on the kitchen table, and I didn't think too hard about what they meant, or what they cost, or whether she was sincere, because I had stopped making her sincerity my problem. That was the thing nobody tells you about finally holding your ground. It isn't dramatic. It doesn't feel like a victory in the way movies tell you it will. It feels more like setting something heavy down and then just walking forward without it. She'd spent 3 years trying to make me understand that I was standing on borrowed ground. I had spent those same 3 years quietly buying my own.